Can't wait.
Brethren, I think we're going to get the show on the road. So without further ado, I greet you one and all. Welcome to what we've called the President's Presentations. We're trying to do these every 2 weeks. And more importantly, we're trying to also target the younger Masons, and we're trying to keep the candidates and the prospective candidates warm and fuzzy to get them ready. However, tonight's presentation is based on the charge after initiation. And as some people might be aware, it's probably one of the most important charges there is, because it really covers the basis of being a Mason. Another part of this presentation, and why I'm going to hand over, is us golden oldies need to take a seat in the background, and we really need to let the younger chaps shine. Hence, I tried to get a lot of entered apprentices on it and newly made Masons. What the format will be this evening is Brother Mike Reinders is going to present the charge after initiation and a discussion around certain words, certain lines. If you wish to ask a question and it's pertinent at the time, please pop it up in the chats. If it is something that I need to stop him on and pose the question to him, I will do that. Otherwise, I will let him get through with everything, and then I shall pose the questions thereafter. To keep it interesting, I'd like to limit it to 45 minutes if we can, unless we get into some real detail. I think the elder, or rather, let's say the long-standing Masons, might find it interesting to be reminded of that charge after initiation, because I think a lot of us sort of snooze during that time because we've heard it so much. So a couple of house rules, please, if you'll mute your cameras, not your cameras, your sound. In the chat, if you want to post anything, please feel free to do so. If you want to stay anonymous, send it directly to me, and I will post it or question it as anonymous. Without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Brother Mike. Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Brother Lawrence. Good evening, brethren. As Brother Lawrence said just now, we will be discussing the charge after initiation in particular. This is one of my absolute favorite pieces in craft ritual, and I've spent countless hours pondering its intricacies. With that being said, I think Worshipful Brother Brian McDermott said it best. The first degree charge is the essence of Freemasonry. It rings true with me, and we will jump straight into it, and I will explain to you why I do agree with him on this topic. I will not be reciting the whole charge, as I'm sure most of us have heard it multiple times, and at the very least, you would have heard it once during your initiation. But I am going to do a few quotes out of the charge and then just elaborate a bit further on that. As Brother Lawrence said, please, there's no stupid questions. Feel free to ask away. We are more than happy to answer those questions, and we're quite fortunate to have some very distinguished Masons with us tonight again. The charge begins with, brother, as you have passed through the ceremony of your initiation, let me congratulate you on being admitted a member of our ancient and honorable institution. Ancient, no doubt it is, as having subsisted from time immemorial. For those of you that might not already know this, Freemasonry is the oldest fraternal organization in the world. This is no small feat, considering that, you know, the sometimes tumultuous history of the world. And the oldest Masonic document, the Regius Poem, is believed to have existed as early as about 924 to 940 AD. And it is still written in Old Chaucerian English, which is Middle English, and a copy dated around 1390 AD is actually preserved within the British Museum. I haven't seen it myself, but I think it's it's worthwhile if you are in the area to, to go have a look at the, that oldest document that we know of. To add on to this document, for me, perhaps its most noticeable feature is it ends with what is, as far as known, the oldest words in Masonic ritual, which is "so mote it be." And in Old English, very simple, mote is just a Old English word for may. I love the rich history of Freemasonry, and I found this quite interesting, and it was really worthwhile looking into. The charge after initiation then carries on. And honorable, it must be acknowledged to be, as by natural tendency, it conduces to make those so, who are obedient to its precepts. Indeed, no institution can boast a more solid foundation than that on which Freemasonry rests, the practice of every moral and social virtue. If we follow the guidelines set forth in the charge, such as the practice of every moral and social virtue, and we adhere to the craft's principles, we actually breathe life into this piece of ritual. Our words become actions, and as a result, we reflect honor on both our ancient institution and ourselves. Or as we love to say, in my opinion, taking good men and making them better. For me, this is true for most of the ritual. If you practice it, you will become a better man. And there is a lot to be learned from it. And there is a lot, there is a wealth of history and information and guidelines in our craft ritual. The charge then carries on. And it says, to so high an eminence has its credit been advanced, that in every age monarchs themselves have been promoters of the art, have not thought it derogatory to their dignity to exchange the scepter for the trowel, have patronized our mysteries and joined in our assemblies. This is also another facet that's quite about Freemasonry that's quite interesting, and it's quite something special to me. That in fact, no less than 5 reigning monarchs since 1717 have been members of the craft. And it's not to be confused with, and I use mere lightly, but it's not to be confused with mere members of royal families, if there is such a thing as a mere member of a royal family, but actual reigning monarchs. In short, I think even kings have joined our fraternity and took the humblest of positions and actually rubbed shoulders with the lowliest of persons at times. And this is what makes our fraternity so amazing. I think you will not find it any other place on the face of the earth. The special bond that Masons share with each other. And again, Freemasonry to me is the great leveler, as they say. Again, one of those members, just a normal member or just a member of the royal family who is also a Freemason, is actually our Grand Master, His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent, and he is in fact the Queen's cousin. Just as a point of interest, I'm sure everyone knows, but the Queen's late husband, Prince Philip, was also a Freemason. The charge then carries on. As a Freemason, let me recommend to your most serious contemplation the volume of the Sacred Law, charging you to consider it as the unerring standard of truth and justice, and to regulate your actions by the divine precepts it contains. Therein you will be taught the important duties you owe to God, to your neighbor, and to yourself. So again, brethren, I think the volume of the Sacred Law needs no explaining. It's simply the book you regard as sacred to your religion. But what is worth looking at in this specific portion is there is a recommendation or charge, if you will, to consider it as the unerring standard of truth and justice, and to regulate your actions by the divine precept, the divine precepts it contains. And then there's three important duties that follows thereafter. And I'd just like to elaborate a bit on those. So again, to God, the great architect of the universe should be treated with great respect and, you know, with awe and with reverence. Our duties to the great architect of the universe is present from the very beginning of the first degree ritual. If you would let your mind wander to the very first parts of the ceremony before you were admitted into the lodge. Even before entering the lodge for the first time, you were asked, how do you hope to obtain the privileges of Freemasonry? And the answer was, by the help of God. And again, immediately after the prayer, in all cases of difficulty and danger, in whom do you place your trust? And again, in God. So it is described quite thoroughly, these duties we owe to God, throughout the first degree ritual, and the rest of the ritual as well. But this is just such a beautifully descriptive piece of the duties, those three important duties that we owe as Freemasons. Then we carry on to your neighbor. Yeah, we've got the familiar concept of do unto others as you would them do unto you. I think most people are familiar with this, and I don't think that anyone is in conflict with anything, thus far. If I may direct your attention to the following extraction as a matter of general information. This comes out of the piece I previously mentioned. By rendering him, this is your neighbor now, by rendering him every kind office which justice or mercy may require. Some of you might know, some of you might not know, but in this context, the word office is used as a synonym for service. So if it was a more modern form of English, it would have read, by rendering him every kind service which justice or mercy may require. And I hope for some of you, some of these explanations and descriptions might help you to get a better grasp on our ritual. Then we carry on to yourself, and this is quite important to me. And as men and as husbands and as fathers and as breadwinners in some cases, we often neglect this. But to yourself, you need to be mindful of your own physical and mental well-being. And you need to do this for you to be able to be a decent and a useful member of society. And again, I would like to come back to when I quoted Brother Brian McDermott. I think the charge is the essence of Freemasonry, and you've got this roadmap, and you've got all these wonderful charges and suggestions. And if you follow them, there cannot be any other result than you being a better man or becoming a better man than what you were. The charge then carries on. As a citizen of the world, I am to enjoin you to be exemplary in the discharge of your civil duties, by never proposing or at all countenancing any act that may have a tendency to subvert the peace and good order of society, by paying due obedience to the laws of any state which may for a time become the place of your residence or afford you its protection. So I would just like to go back into history a little bit on this particular portion. And just a brief summary. We can elaborate a lot on this, but just a brief summary. During the 17th century unrest, all public meetings were prohibited. And it was by the authority of a charter issued by the king that we were able to meet and practice our craft. And this is why we, their descendants, reaffirm our allegiance to the monarchy or to the state of the country we reside in. Carrying on to the next portion. And above all, by never losing sight of the allegiance due to the sovereign of your native land, and ever remembering that nature has implanted in your breast a sacred and indissoluble attachment to the country whence you derived your birth and infant nurture. This particular portion is so applicable to us in this district and in this country at this time, where we have so many brethren leaving our shores. But again, I think the message contained within the charge is clear. Always remember your native country, as it provided you your birth and infant nurture. And I think it should be true for every Freemason. Your native country has a special place in your heart, and you will always remember that, that special place. And I think for it to be written in this ancient ritual of ours, there has to be something profound about that as well. The charge then carries on. As an individual, let me recommend the practice of every domestic as well as public virtue. So for me personally, this concerns our personal lives. I think as Freemasons, we must always endeavor to practice the same value system and virtues, whether it be in the light of day for all to see or in the darkness behind closed doors. I think our conduct and our value system should always remain constant and clear for all to see, who we might come into contact with. We then carry on. Still, as a Freemason, there are other excellences of character to which your attention may be peculiarly and forcibly directed. Amongst the foremost of these are secrecy, fidelity, and obedience. And I think, again, it's portions such as these, if the general public reads this is where a lot of misinterpretations come from. Things like this. What is this whole secrecy, and what is the obedience, and all of those things. But and we'll see that through the remainder of the charge and through the whole charge. It's just, this is the way that this ritual was written. And I think the charge actually appeared for the first time in this type of form in the first degree ritual circa 1772. Now, I must admit that it has changed, but it actually hasn't changed an awful lot. And I think it's quite significant that something could have been written in this form, almost 300 years ago, and we still use it today. And it still makes sense, and it still holds value to us as Freemasons. So if we pull that apart a bit, and we start looking at secrecy, fidelity, and obedience, I actually think secrecy is quite simple. The secrets we ought to guard are in most cases simply our signs, tokens, and words. In today's modern age, again, where information is so readily available, our ritual as well as our secrets are available online, and you can reach them with a minimum amount of proficiency on using the internet. You can get a hold of those things. But I think our secrets are basically worthless to the rest of the world. But the difference is, for us as Masons, our secrets are highly prized, and it's one of the small little things that ties us together and that breeds this cohesion and this a camaraderie between Masons and brothers. If we have a look at fidelity, fidelity again, I try and with every new thing that I look at, or with everything that I try and understand, I try and look at, at the most simplest explanation that there could be. But to me, fidelity, this just tells me to be unfailingly loyal towards my fraternity and my brothers. And I need to adhere to our constitution, laws, and customs. And I think also, perhaps equally as important, and a part of fidelity is to respect that which has not been made known to me yet. Then we go on to obedience. And again, brethren, I think obedience, it shouldn't be, it shouldn't be a big explanation around these things. But for me, a simple explanation would be, we, the brethren of the lodges, elect a worshipful master from amongst our ranks once every year to rule and govern the lodge. And again, we choose our worshipful master, and therefore, during that time of the master's tenure, we must submit and obey. Here's another one of those misunderstood terms by the general public. So when you talk to some people and they say, but yeah, you've got worshipful masters and all of those things, you guys are trying to be a religion. To me, I always like to look a bit further, and I like to look at history. So this is a misunderstanding again. The word, well, the modern word is worship, but there is an older word that was used which sounded similar. I'm not exactly too sure on the pronunciation, but you can see it in two forms in the old text. It's worship or worship, and it is Old English words which simply means greatly respected. So our definition of the word worship today is totally different than the worship that was used in the original in the original ritual. And there is examples of this, that it is merely things lost in translation over time. So if you look at some of the small little towns in the Commonwealth, you'll still find people calling the mayors your worship. That is also one of these little remnants from the past. Another example that I love to quote on this particular part is that old word worship also appears in the Westcliff's Bible, in Exodus 20 verse 12. And those of you that don't know that, it's that part of worship, and in the old Westcliff Bible it actually says, worship thy father and thy mother. So what that basically means is honor and respect. If you look at the King James version of the Bible now, the Bible translators in those days, or over time, thought it was a better fit and actually clearer to rather use honor thy father and thy mother. So this worship that we use in our ritual is not the same worship as as is being used today in religious institutions and those type of things. For those of you that are history buffs and that might want to know and do a bit of research, the Westcliff Bible is a name given to quite a few Bible translations that was translated into Middle English around the 15th century. And it's called the Westcliff's Bible, just simply named after the person that was in charge of the translations taking place at that time. I think there is, you'll find the Wycliffe, sorry, the Wycliffe, if I said Westcliff, the Wycliffe organization, I think still translates Bibles to this day, you know, looking at old texts and making it easier to read and transforming it into more, you know, into more modern usages of language. Here we come to an interesting part that also falls under the umbrella of obedience in the charge. So in the charge, we are told to abstain from every topic of political or religious discussion. So, as we all know, Freemasonry is a non-political fraternity, and we welcome all good men from all religions, all walks of life. All good men are welcome. But we should, and I think the reason it is there is that we should cautiously avoid these topics while we are engaged in Masonic labor, or especially when representing the fraternity as Freemasons. What that means to me, or well, with that being said, it does not mean that individuals, we are not permitted to partake in matters of political or religious nature. Many Masons even have careers in those fields. But the difference is we are not permitted to do so in our capacity as Freemasons. And simply put, we are not permitted to voice our views having identified ourselves as Freemasons, and neither can we speak as a representative or a spokesperson on behalf of Freemasonry on these topics. Originally, my feeling is it was written into the, you know, into the ritual, partly because what happened during the 17th century in particular, and also I think it is two of the great dividers among mankind, is politics and religion. So it's not to say that you can't belong to a political party. Just don't endorse it as a Freemason and say that all Freemasons are part of this political party. And I think that's the spirit in what was trying to be said to us, is that that we should do everything in our power not to divide us as brothers and as Masons. Moving on from there to the next portion of the charge that I would like to quote. And as a last recommendation, let me exhort you to dedicate yourself to such pursuits as may at once enable you to be respectable in life, useful to mankind, and an ornament to the society of which you have today become a member, or this day become a member. This portion, I think it's self-explanatory, but still it's worth mentioning as it ties in so beautifully with the spirit of the charge. There is such a flow to this piece of ritual, and if you really listen to it, you can learn a lot from it. The next couple of words is to study more, especially such of the liberal arts and sciences as may lie within the compass of your attainment, and without neglecting the ordinary duties of your station, to endeavor to make a daily advancement in Masonic knowledge. So again, this to me is quite easy. This is exactly what we are doing tonight. We are expanding our knowledge base, Masonic or otherwise. And I think this is the crux of what was meant when this was written. Moving on from there, the final paragraph of the charge is again fairly self-explanatory, but in my humble opinion, also the most beautiful. And this is one of the most phenomenal parts in Lodge for me, but to quote the ritual, and indelibly imprint on your heart those sacred dictates of truth, of honor, and of virtue. Just to blow that up a bit, just my own opinion, my feelings of that last little of that last little sentence. Do not only speak the truth, but seek the truth. Always act with honor, be loyal and trustworthy. And then last but not least, be virtuous and always maintain high moral standards. And brethren, in my simple words, Brother Brian McDermott said it's the essence of Freemasonry. In my simple words, I say the charge is a recipe for making a Freemason, containing all the necessary steps and ingredients to become a better man and a Mason. And with that, brethren, I thank you humbly.